to introduce our presenters for today's webinar, Brenda Lawrence and Pam Wagner with Family Design Resources in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Brenda Lawrence is the Executive Director of Family Design Resources and the Program Administrator of the Pennsylvania Statewide Adoption and Permanency Network. She has held a leadership position with SWAN since 1995. Brenda formed a commitment to child welfare as the first supervisor of Bedford County, Pennsylvania's Children and Youth Services, later transitioning to residential treatment at the United Methodist Home for Children in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, where she worked first as a cognitive therapist and case manager, and then as Director of Social Services. Brenda has served in an advisory capacity for the Pennsylvania Resource Family Association, Tri-County Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Child Welfare League of America, and as a member of Family Builders Network. She is also an adoptive parent in a transracial adoption. Pam Wagner has worked in the adoption field for more than 30 years and has been employed with Family Design Resources since 2004. In her role as the Program and Conferencing Division Manager for the Pennsylvania Statewide Adoption and Permanency Network, otherwise known as SWAN, Pam directs program technical assistance, statewide and regional training events, and web-based trainings on SWAN services. Prior to joining Family Design Resources, Pam was a caseworker for Tressler Lutheran Adoption Services, where she trained numerous prospective adoptive families and had the distinct honor of assisting in the placement of a large number of children into their adoptive homes. In addition to her professional ties to adoption, she is the mother of 2 sons who came to their forever home through adoption. Pam is a seasoned presenter, having delivered adoption workshops and training sessions in a variety of settings for 30 years, including the Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Minnesota adoption conferences. She has also been a workshop presenter for the North American Council on Adoptable Children, the Pennsylvania Resource Family Association, and the Daniel Kids Foundation. Brenda and Pam, thank you for taking the time to share with us today. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Good afternoon. What a privilege to be a part of your presentations and pre-conference seminars. We're excited to bring to you the information about Pennsylvania's model. One of the things we want to make sure people understand is that the Pennsylvania model is part of the Statewide Adoption and Permanency Network in Pennsylvania, which people refer to as SWAN. It is a public and private collaboration between the state and a private provider to deliver these services throughout the state so that more children and youth could achieve permanency in a timely manner, and that so that families could maintain their role in permanency over the life of adoption. So, where am I going? I'm trying to advance my slides here. Why isn't it doing that? That's weird. We're having a quiet time here because I'm not sure why I can't bring up the next slide. We didn't talk about that problem. I'm going to keep on talking until we can solve this problem, and I will let people know that this slideshow is about 25 slides, and we will make it available to you afterwards with no problem. So I will continue to talk until we're able to advance the screen to the next slide, which talks about these services for post-permanency being put in place in 2003. In Pennsylvania, before 2003, adoption, post-permanency was referred to as post-adoption, and some of our providers provided only post-adoption services. The state realized that we needed to provide services to a wider array of permanency families and wanted to standardize statewide services So they intentionally set forth an effort to plan and design services that would be available to families of adoption, permanent legal custodianship, and formal kinship care. And just to take people out of the mystery and wonderment of what those services were decided to be, that the services that were established were case assessment, case advocacy, support group services, and respite care. Those services that were determined were, the state determined those because they established that through what they referred to in 2001 and 2002 as the gaps analysis that they did. In order to perform, oh, there we go. I'm on the next slide. So, thank you. I'm sorry for that disruption. In order to perform those gaps to perform that gaps analysis, the state did two things. One, they went and looked at other states such as Ohio, Maryland, Illinois, Massachusetts, just to name a few, and asked what services they were providing or were aware of needing provided. And then they asked us as the prime contractor to ask the private providers who were delivering post-adoption services, what are the services that existed, what are the services that families needed, and what didn't exist. And no surprise to many of us, we learned much of what the same thing, reviewed the Evan B. Donaldson findings from a couple of years ago in their ASAP paper, where they said those things needed: case of advocacy, support groups, respite, and they also mentioned the mental health adoption competency. So in Pennsylvania, we were happy to know when that finding came out that we were addressing 3 of the 4 needs: case, advocacy, support, and respite. We do know that we are still in need of improving the mental health adoption competency, and efforts are underway to make sure that happens while CASE is building their online solution. Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, so before we go any further, I wanted to ask some of our attendees to participate in a brief poll, and I'll show you our first question. And if you would, where is it? Launch. Okay. Take a minute and respond to that question. I'll just give you a few seconds. And then we'll see what we know. Is that done, you think? Okay, I'm going to close that. Looks like most people have responded. And here's what we learned. We learned that 19% are private provider caseworkers, 13% are children and youth caseworkers, 19% are supervisors, 2% are legal professionals, and 46% others. There's a mystery. Okay. Thank you for participating in that. It's always helpful to know. So now I'm going to turn our presentation over to my partner, Wagner, and Pam's going to talk to you a little bit about the reason behind these services, and I want you to know that Pam's going to go in a lot more detail about this when she does one of the webinars, post-conference webinars this fall. Okay, so I'm going to share this with Pam, and our PowerPoint slide again is stuck, so we'll get you on to the next slide as soon as possible.
Hi everyone, this is Pam Wagner, and we're very thrilled to be here today and talking to you about post-permanency. It's something that Brenda and both professionally feel very committed to, as well as personally feel very committed to. We know the importance of it, and I think, you know, we welcome the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what we do here in Pennsylvania. I want to, first of all, before we get into our program and what that consists of, I want to talk to you a little bit about why we make the commitment to post-permanency, why that has become one of the things that we put on the front burner in Pennsylvania. And I think, first of all, we do it because we feel that there is a tremendous ethical responsibility on the part of both our public agencies, our children and youth, our private agencies who work with the families, our state and our prime contractor, to be able to talk about the fact that we basically have an ethical responsibility. And so what is an ethical responsibility? Well, a lot of times we look at our legal responsibility. Am I legally responsible to offer this? But we never want just the legal to guide us. We should rise above just whether it's a legal consideration. But ethical means that it's a win-win for both people. It's a win for the families because they receive the services they need in order to maintain healthy relationships, in order to be able to go on. And it's a win for agencies because we don't have children then as likely to re-enter the system because of dissolution or disruption. So one of the reasons we look at this is it the right thing to do? How would we want to be treated in a situation? If this were our family, how would we want people to respond? So first of all, we believe in this because we believe it's an ethical responsibility. Second, we know that research shows that families that are given the right support stay together. There really is no point in creating families if, in fact, we don't give them the support and they fall apart. So we try to say, what can we do to make sure that not only did we have a big hand in creating this family, but how do we make them stay together then in the end? And then thirdly, quality of life. I don't think anybody wants to believe that families, we put families together, we sometimes put them in challenging situations with children who've had a lot of trauma, and we just expect those families to survive or those children to survive until age 18 or whatever. But we really want these families to thrive, to be able to leave and go forth in a way that not only is just making it, but that they are doing it in style and that they are able to achieve the goals they have for themselves and that they have for their children. So as we're talking today, we're going to be talking about our program a little bit and what it consists of and the kind of issues and the foundational issues that we have in place. Well, first of all, before we get started in the different components of our program, I want to talk to you about the foundational piece. Pennsylvania post-permanency services are based on three things. First of all, they're family-driven, which is really, we want to start out from a position of empowering families. Oftentimes, by the time families get to the point that they are needing post-perm services, you know, they're experiencing a lot, and oftentimes they feel out of control. And yet, sometimes they're the people who best know what their families need. So we really make it family-driven, and by that, what we mean is if families want these services, all they need to do is call. The family makes the decision when it's the right time, and then they call to make that request. Also, we try to make it as much as possible non-judgmental. This is very difficult work we're asking families to do, and families are dealing with this 24/7. So I don't think any of us want to sit in judgment of families. I think it really is, except for the grace of God go I, we definitely know that we all run into issues. We're all going to run into problems. And if we can be there for others, then others can be there for us. And strength-based. We really don't want to make this something where we're focusing on the negatives, but we want to make sure that we're focusing on the positives, that we're really making this about what, if these are the things we can't do, what are the things that we can do for you? So we're really looking at where are the things that we can make a difference, where are the things that we can make an impact. Right now we're going to ask you another question, give you a chance to answer that in the poll. So if you look at your screen, we're going to ask you one more question. Should be seeing it now.
Wow.
Okay, we're going to close the poll, and I'm going to give you the results. The question we asked everyone was, how are your post-perm services funded? And we have 71% that are state funded. We have 3% county funded. 10% are funded through grants obtained through those agencies. 5% are family funded, and 10% are funded through other sources. So overwhelmingly, the number of the type of funding is state. So most of the folks on here are getting their funding through their state in order to deliver services on post-permanency. Thank you all for participating in that. Yeah, I think you went too far. There. Yeah. Sorry about that. Next, we're going to talk about the framework. If you're going to have a model and it's going to be strong, you have to have a framework to build this on. And you have to have a system that acts as checks and balances. And we found, as we moved through our model, as we developed it, that there were different checks and balances, and that this particular framework I'm going to describe worked well for us. First of all, we asked that every agency provide a proposal, and I'm going to go through these individually. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about capacity and how we see capacity. Thirdly, I'm going to talk to you, Brenda and I are going to talk to you about regional program technical assistance and what we have in place for that. Then I'm going to also mention about our unit of service meetings for providers, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about the benchmarks. Written proposals. Every agency who provides post-permanency support through us must offer a written proposal. And what this does for us is it gives us a glimpse into the practice of every agency we work with. These are very detailed proposals. And what we ask in terms of these proposals, we start out with just wanting to know about the agency. We want to know what the staffing is. How many staff they have, the type of education their staff has, the percentage of time each staff member is going to devote to these units of service. We ask them about how they're going to process a referral. We want to make sure that as much as possible this is streamlined and that it's going to move, because when we have families who are waiting for services, we don't want our agencies to be a barrier to this. Then we're going to ask them how they deliver services, and this is where we really find out about their practice. How are they proposing to do this? For some, we ask them, what is their curriculum? What does their group work look like? What is their support groups? When are they going to meet? How are they proposing they meet? How long are they going to be? Are they going to be providing childcare within that? What type of support group are we talking about? So it is really about, what does your practice look like? What are you going to be talking about? What are you going to be doing? The same for respite and the same for case advocacies. What this allows us to do is to look at the minimum standard that agencies have. We get to see across the board, across the state, that agencies are meeting certain standards we've established. So, and how this benefits families, and remember, this is really about benefiting families. How this benefits families is that when that standard's established, what we know is that if a family in Pittsburgh is going in for services and they move to Philadelphia, that they should be able to expect within reason very similar services, that it's not just a hit or miss, but that across the state through our network they are going to be able to get the services they need, and that they're going to be standardized. The other thing this allows us to do is when an agency decides that they, maybe because practice is moving on or because they have developed in terms of their ability to deliver services, they can change their proposals. And again, we get a sense of how, on a statewide sense, how practice is moving, but we also get a very good sense of what's happening with that agency. And when they change practice, we're aware of that. And the other thing is that overall, as we look at these proposals, from a prime contractor perspective, we're able to see that if there are any gaps in terms of what needs to be provided, we do a follow-up. We're going to talk about how we are able to determine this. And then we can bring to agencies through other means, through meetings, through consultation, we can help them fill those gaps and help them to enhance their practice. Because we're not here to just, as we look at what we're doing, we're not here to be a big brother, but more to say, how do we keep challenging each other to make better and better practice decisions as we're out there in the field, and to bring in promising practice from agencies who are trying new things so that everyone in the state has the opportunity to hear and to learn about those. The next thing is capacity, and here's capacity in a nutshell. It is the number of families that can be served by one agency at one time. And if you look at the little graph there, you see the guy in the umbrella, and he's being rained on upside down. And the truth is, every person, and including agencies, has a limit in terms of what they're able to do. And if you deliver service poorly, then no one gets served. So what we're asking agencies to do is to look at, realistically, given the number of workers you have, given their experience, given the infrastructure your agency has, realistically, how many families can you serve well? And I underline that word well. And we sit down with agencies and we talk about this capacity from the beginning. And surprisingly, we thought that most people would push back at having a limited capacity. But the truth is, a lot of agencies are just the opposite of that. They are reluctant sometimes to increase capacity, even though as we look at their numbers, we say, well, you could really probably handle more. But I think what it's done for us is enable families to get good service and enable agencies to really realistically look at what can we do. Because if services aren't delivered well, then they most certainly can cause the situation to be worse.
Hi, this is Brenda. Thank you, Pam. I love that graphic about the guy in the umbrella. We all have those days, but our families get a lot of support here. The next thing we want to talk about in terms of our development and implementation of these services is our regional and program technical assistant staffing that we provide. When we have private providers who have been approved to deliver the post-permanency services, two professionals are assigned to them. One is the technical assistance that's assigned to them on a regional basis to help them understand how to manage their referrals, how to do invoicing, some of the methods of their work are to perform the work on a regular basis. And then they have a program post-permanency technical assistant provided to them that helps them to understand whether or not they are delivering the services that they say, how to evaluate the services that they're providing, if there are any practice challenges, should we do it this way, should we do it that way in terms of delivering some services to families. Those program people can give them that expertise. And the program people also go back in and look at some of the services that were delivered to see if the agency that provided the post-permanency service did follow the outline of their proposal and deliver the services in a way that they had said that they were going to be able to do it. And if we see any inconsistencies, then both of those technical assistants work together with that private provider to enhance their work and make the corrections if it's necessary. You can imagine when we first initiated the post-permanency services, there were challenges, new questions that came up that now we've addressed, and things are operating much more differently than they were in the first couple of years of implementation. And watching what people were delivering and evaluating what they were delivering and talking to them about it on a regular basis was critical in order for us to bring things into alignment. Another thing that we found that's very helpful in our work with the private providers, understand that the statewide adoption and permanency network works well because we do network. We intentionally set up situations where we network with each other. In other words, we have the public caseworkers and the private provider caseworkers come together at least 4 times a year where they can run into each other and get to know each other a little bit. But in addition to that, we set up intentional unit of service meetings where just the private providers come together and can really talk about challenges they're having, changes that they're experiencing with the services available in their communities or the families that they're addressing, and work together to solve those issues that come up to people. I don't know if you've noticed it out there in some of the other states, but too often when you work in the world of adoption or permanent legal custodianship, post-permanency kind of things, staff or family can sometimes feel isolated in the delivery of their services. And dealing with challenges sometimes presented, or families can feel as though there's no one that understands what's going on with their struggles. So the unit of service meetings serve many purposes, and they are not required attendance. They're suggested that people should come, but we find a high percentage of the affiliates do come and listen to each other's successes, challenges, and the solutions that they found. And I think it does keep them motivated to feel as though they're not alone out there working in the world of adoption and supporting some families who have some very challenging situations. So that keeps them informed about any changes that we make as a prime contract for either how we authorize services or any changes that come to them. We started having those service meetings when we initiated the service and thought, oh, maybe we don't need them anymore once things got running smoothly, but we found that they continue to be a popular item for post-permanency providers to come to keep their skills and responses sharp. Another thing that we've developed in Pennsylvania is something called benchmarks, and these were a set of standards that were established throughout the network with each unit of service we provide including the services related to post-permanency. And so this way, as Pam had mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure there were standards set that were enforced across the state, these benchmarks that define the steps of receiving referrals, contacting families, completing assessments, completing summaries, making community contacts, that these are all outlined in such a way that each agency knows the order of the services, how they should roll out, and how they can request additional services. So also counties want to know that what are they asking for when they tell a family to ask for post-permanency services. And the benchmarks are also helpful to them to know, oh, okay, I get this is what we're going to be receiving. So now Pam's going to talk to you a little bit about the post-permanency goals.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I want to talk to you next about the post-permanency goals. Well, first of all, I want to say that, and you all know this, that there is no panacea out there. I wish there were. I wish that we could wave magic wands and we could make everything better for families. But the truth is, this is tough work they're doing. It's a tough job. Sometimes there is no good answer. But what we want to do, our goal is to try to make it as easy for families as we can, to try to alleviate some of the things that they're going through, the struggles they have. But there is no way that any program, any model, is going to be able to deliver everything. We live in a real world, and we see the struggles every day. But when we set our goals, what we try to say is, what are the things that we can measure, what's tangible, what's doable, and what's reasonable. As with all of you, we do not have unlimited resources. We have limits on what we can provide, and so we want to make that time we have with families the best we can do. So first of all, we have 5 goals that we try to achieve with families. When they call in to us and say, you know, we need help. First of all, we realize that a lot of times when families have gone through crisis, when they're going through crisis, they're lacking connection in their community. Sometimes, again, as all of you know who provide post-permanency services to families, families who are in crisis, families who are experiencing difficulty often feel very alone. They feel very unconnected. Sometimes they withdraw themselves. So one of our goals is, in working with post-perm families, to make sure that they're getting some connection to the community, whether that's you know, through support group, whether that's getting out into their community through other avenues, but to make sure that. Secondly, stronger connection to resources. We're trying to make sure that families have the resources they need. Also to each other. Again, when you have families who have separated, maybe they're not as connected, they're not as cohesive as they once were, we work to try to bring those connections together. To increase their confidence and competency. Families often lose their confidence in these situations, especially when you're dealing with a child who's gone through a lot of trauma, maybe, and you've gone through trauma. And so, and then ultimately to prevent reentry into the children and youth system. So our goals are pretty simple. So now what we'd like to do is to ask you a question, and we'd like you to respond. And we'd like to know what unit of service is most requested on your part.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, we're going to close the poll. Let you see what happened. Okay, Pam.
Okay, so case management is generally across the board, they're fairly even. Case management has 31%, which is the highest. Respite, 27%. 17 support group, and 25% others. So almost even across the board. Case management just a little bit more. I would say that runs very close to what we see in Pennsylvania. We do a lot of case advocacy, which is what we call case advocacy, and also a lot for support group. Okay, next is accessing family-driven services. So how do people get a hold of us? How do they let us know? Well, we tried to make this process as easy as possible. Just 4 steps. I told you earlier that it is family initiated, which means that families have call in. We have 1-800 number that they use. We advertise that on all of our literature. Our agencies advertise it. Secondly, the family selects the agency they want to provide the service. Sometimes it's the agency that placed the child. These are all private provider agencies. Sometimes it's a different agency, but the family makes that selection. Again, when families are feeling like they don't have much power, it's very important to empower them. Our affiliates, our private provider will receive that assessment, and then they will start that assessment process. So I'm going to talk next about our units of service. Post-permanency units of service, we have 4. We count assessment as one. We feel assessment is very important in the process. Secondly, we have advocacy. Some of you may call that case management. And that is really helping families make those initial connections, giving them what they need, whether that's assistance around education, whether that's assistance locating services or a therapist, and then also respite. We talk about different types of respite that we are provide, and then of course support groups. And this can look different, but the idea of families coming together to support other families. So next, Brenda's going to talk to you a little bit about case assessment.
So the case assessment takes about 30 days. From the time the referral starts, we give our agencies about 30 days to connect with the family and complete some assessment tools. They probably go out and visit with the family on a couple different occasions, so that at the end of those 30 days, they have a pretty good sense of what's going on in that family, what are their strengths, what are the things that they need to keep them moving along and keep them strong. So they look at safety, they look at the risk, they look at the needs the family have and strengths. The tools that they use, as you see on the PowerPoint, are assessment tools that include a risk assessment, a safety assessment, a CAFAS, and the GIF and FACES 3. And the CAFAS and the GIF are both documents that the CAFAS is something that the worker completes as they sit and talk with the family. But the GIF is a new item that has been created by the developer of the CAFAS, which is Dr. Kay Hodges. And the GIF is a juvenile inventory for functioning. And it allows both the youth and the family to go in and complete an inventory. It does not require questions. It's web-based. It's very useful and user-friendly. And then the FACES 3. We also then use all of that information to build a family support plan with the family's input and the family's agreement that here's the things that they want to achieve. It doesn't matter that the worker may say, here's the presenting problem. If the family's looking at something different, we need to go where the family is and then help them achieve that success. Once this is completed, they submit the assessment with the recommended services, and that assessment is what tells us, do they go on with case advocacy for a number of months? Do they get support services, or do they get respite services, or do they need all three? Not all families need everything after we've gone through the assessment. What we've known very briefly about those doing some analysis of the CAFAS and phases 3 over the years is that the phases 3 results have showed us that the parents feel as though their parent functioning and adaptability has increased because of the post-permanency services they've received. The CAFAS scores have decreased, which indicate to us that the families feel like they have a little bit more control over the situation, a little bit more understanding. And what we really had to look at very closely was that where we were assessing some of the issues specific to the child that they had adopted, a lot of, and in about 300 of the 3,000 cases we were looking at, we saw a significant drop whenever we were looking at the information specific to how they felt like they could work with the child and the child's situation improving. The other thing was from a satisfaction surveys from our family, 68% feel more in control. 73% of over almost 3,000 families felt they were more supported because of the services they provided. They had more resources, and 66% said that it helped them to maintain their child in their home, whereas when service started, they may have been wondering, can we keep this going? Can we survive? So the family support plan, more specifically, as we said, it needs to be strength-based. It's collaboratively built. The family must be involved because this is family-driven. It identifies their needs. It identifies their goals. And those goals get tied back into the tools that we use for assessment that we talked about. That family support plan is going to be dynamic, and it's going to be reviewed several times throughout this delivery of those services. And it really provides the roadmap to what is going to happen within the next services. So the case advocacy, which we're going to talk about briefly, can result in a number of things. Families making necessary connections to the support they needed. As Pam so eloquently talked about earlier, when we know that families need something but they don't know how to find it, especially because they need those special supports and connections made because they're adoptive families, because their child is a permanent legal custodian situation and the rules aren't the same for them as they are for everybody else. So we must make those connections. And the case advocacy can also result in increased family integration, pulling those families back together. Maybe they find resources within their own family that they didn't realize. Parental entitlement. Sometimes families need to be reminded, hey, you're in charge here. You're the people making the decisions. You know, take that charge and we'll help you refocus on what you need to do. And they also increase their knowledge about the available resources in their community or online or wherever else they need to find resources. Those of us who adopted 20 years ago know the resources available to families now are much more prevalent than they were 20 years ago. So that's a really nice thing, but sometimes they don't know where to find them. And they also have resulted in more confidence to address future situations so that whenever the post-permanency worker walks away, the families might feel more like they have an awareness of being able to handle those problems going forward. Now we're going to go back to one last, I think it's the last question that we have today for your polling. We want to talk a little bit about respite services and see what you all know about respite services in your area. So if you take a few minutes and respond to this poll. think we're doing good? Okay. All right. Just a few more seconds and we'll close this poll. I think we've got it. So here's what we heard from you. 25% of you said overnight respite is what's being requested. 2% talk about a drop-in center. 15% talk about camps. 21% talk about weekend retreats. And 38% talk about other. There's a question I'd love to have answered if we had another hour. What are those others? That would be kind of neat. But it's interesting to see that the camps and retreats end up being over 35%, which we hear a lot about across the state. Thank you for that. So Pam's going to talk to you about some of the focus we have on respite service.
Well, I'm just going to go over this since most of you are familiar with respite services. Obviously, there are just some of the things that we've found and feel we use it for in terms of our support plan for families is that it enhances attachment, which sometimes seems weird, but it really gives family members a space, sometimes that break from each other, and that we found that to be incredibly important. We think that it's also, in its own way, very ethical because it's a win-win often for the parent and the child. Oftentimes kids are feeling just as much pressure as the parents, you know, when things aren't going well in the home or there's stressful situations. A break, the child needs a break just as much sometimes as the parent does. And, you know, being seen in a different light by different people, given the opportunity to get out of a certain mold, benefits both the child and the parent. Physically and emotionally safe for both. And we also feel that respite nurtures the family. And if we can help to set respite up, if we can make sure that the homes children are entering into are safe, families are prepared, we feel that reducing those surprises really helps people to get the full benefit of respite services. We never, you know, obviously want to lose sight of our goal, which is to keep families together, to keep them healthy, and respite is one of the ways that that happens. The other thing I'm just going to show you on the screen, or you have in your, is examples of respite programs we do. Parents' Night Out, Kids' Day Out. We also have sponsored weekend retreats. Like many of you, summer camps, day camps are something big. Also, we have parents who use their families who use it for date night. You know, sometimes once or twice a month they get out and leave the kids at home or give the kids a respite with another family. We also do exchange respites where one family takes a child, and then maybe next time that family will leave their child with another family. Thus, they kind of get to know each other, but they get that opportunity to give a break and also to get a break. Obviously, the benefits of this are networking around communities, benefits of support group, I'm sorry. Networking about community resources. That's very important. I think we find that support groups are very lasting for our families, and being able to support them, being able to help fund them is very important. But for our families, you have to have that sense of connectedness with one another. We all need it. You have to know that people are in the same boat as you, that people are experiencing the same triumphs, but also sometimes the same struggles. And I think our families generally respond well to support groups. We also think it normalizes experience. I am a a family whose 2 children came home through adoption, and I find it incredibly valuable to be able to talk to other families who have experienced some of the same things I've experienced and feel like I'm not alone in that boat. Also to develop mentors. I don't think there's anything more valuable than someone who's gone down that path before you and can help you see that there is light sometimes at the end of that tunnel. And we also, the parent-to-parent support group network, where we have parents who take their information, the things they've learned, the wisdom they've gained, and share that with other parents through support networks. So I think support groups for us have been extremely popular, and people find that something that they respond to and oftentimes stay in for decades. They get to share and hear feelings and experiences, again, provide information. And also they get to advocate for each other. You know, if someone's having a problem at school and someone walks in and they say, oh, I've dealt with that, or here's a number you can use, or here's a way, maybe if we get together we can deal with this issue. I think you know, many of the agencies we think now as stalwarts in adoption, places like NACAC really started out as families sitting around a table with a common interest, with a common theme, and being able to address those. And so I think there's just such tremendous power in being able to engage in support groups in that way. Social networking. You know, I think that, you know, sometimes when kids are little, and I've been involved in support groups where, you know, children who are younger are there, and sometimes that's a very social outlet. And then as the children grow and the issues become more complex, the families already have a knowledge of each other. They know each other's stories, and that's very important. Fun, I think you have to have fun. No matter where you're at, humor is how I think most of us as families get through, and I think that's very important. And also conferences. We have a summer conference where we have families attend, and we label all of our families. We put little name tags on, and we say we're very proud that we're families, and we can find each other, and we can talk to each other, and we can get that sense of community. And there's just, I don't think there's anything more valuable to us. I'm going to turn this. And also our children come to the conference, and we do a kids programming with that. So, and every year it is, I've been going for 20 years, and I can tell you every year it's unique, and every year it is, you know, just a blessing to see families and professionals and kids come together in that way and really learn from each other. Brenda's going to talk a little bit about support group activities.
Thank you, Pam. Just to continue with where Pam had started talking to us about some more support group activities, they serve as a public voice. Just like Pam said, NACAC started because people started sitting around, and then they said, hey, we can do something about these things. And we know that a lot of times, whether it's a small support group in one county or statewide, that it's the families that speak up that can get some changes to occur. And advocate for the changes that need to occur in the system. In Pennsylvania, we're very fortunate because the state and our contractor are very intentional about it being inclusive of adoptive families, permanent families that provide kinship or PLC, permanent legal custodianship, in some of the decision-making places, so that their voice is heard immediately, as often as possible. Another thing is that families then can also identify and share resources. If they found a book that's helpful, if they found an intervention that's helpful, and if they found a resource in the mental health community that has made a difference for their specific issue. The affiliates sometimes come together to provide collaborative support groups, so that only one, it's not just each affiliate doing one thing, but sometimes they come together and say, we'll share these support groups. So they share resources and cross-section of the agency services. They learn more about the pediatricians in their area and those that are more in tune to our children who move through the system and the trauma that presents to our kids and what you see coming out of that, and also those pediatricians being aware that many times our children are a little bit more exposed to some of the medical challenges that can be out there. And then the support group activities also help with dealing with educational challenges, and whether it's getting kids placed in time in the right services in school, getting in the right programs, or just helping them be able to complete their school work. So what we found is that providing funding for support groups before or after people initiate post-permanency services has raised a point of discussion here in Pennsylvania, so that before they had to go through the case assessment process to be approved for support groups. But consistently, many of the providers were saying families should be able to get to support groups without having to go through the assessment. And so at this point, the state is working on a revision of accessing services so that support group can occur prior to assessment. And also we're looking at solutions to online or virtual support groups for those families who live in remote areas and can't easily get to a meeting or can't easily find somebody to watch their children or bring their children to the support group, depending upon the services their children need or the activities their children are involved in. So I'm looking forward to these seminars and the conference in Tennessee to find out if we're going to learn anything more about things, special services like that. So that would be helpful. In Pennsylvania, two other things I wanted to share. We all do have a DVD that will be uploaded to our website soon, at the SWAN website. And that DVD is actual families who have received post-permanency services talking about the values, the value added to them in whatever area, whether it was respite, advocacy, support group, and the added confidence that it gave them to know that there are other people out there to call on. I think that's a wonderful message. We were hoping to share with you some of those clips, but sometime along the way we can certainly share how to get to that. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, what time is it? Oh, I'm going to stop now because I think there may be some questions. We can address the questions. So do I need to go to the questions?
Yeah. Wait a minute.
All right. It looks like we actually do have quite a few questions. We're going to make it through as many as we can, but I'm guessing, what do you see, Cindy? I think we have probably close to a dozen questions, which is fantastic. Please know, if we don't get to the question that you asked, as we talked about earlier, we will provide both the questions and the responses that Pam and Brenda will provide to us, to everybody who is joined us on the webinar today. First question for you, Brenda and Pam. How many agencies are there in Pennsylvania that are providing what we would call in Tennessee ASAP, Adoption Support and Preservation, or post-permanency services as you call them?
That's a quick and easy answer. About 70.
70 different agencies? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That's actually pretty impressive. We'll have to figure out how many we have here in Tennessee. Another question for you. It appears that there is a big emphasis in your programs on respite, support, and case management, maybe not so much on counseling or therapy for children and families. Is that truly the case? And if so, would you address that preference? Meaning, basically, I mean, are you providing much of that piece of the actual maybe in-home counseling, face-to-face, or not?
I would say that the need for respite support and counseling are probably equal. But what has happened in Pennsylvania is we can go in and do assessment. We can sit and talk with the families to clarify what the issues are and help them be more clear on what's going on. But the expectation of delivering actual mental health counseling to those families, as the state is saying to us, we are the conduit to find those mental health resources, the therapists, and connect those families to them so that we can finalize the service and move out of the family, after the 4, 6, or 7 months of advocacy of connecting them to everything. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation that one of the things that we are working on in Pennsylvania is to strengthen our mental health community to be more adoption competent. But until we have a statewide program offered, we do try to stay in touch with each other and let folks know which therapists seem to be trauma-informed, trauma practice, attachment disorder folks, so that we have a strong communication group around how to connect with that. Pam's going to add something.
I just wanted to say that the other thing is that many of the agencies, private agencies that we're talking about, do have mental health components, and while it's not offered through the services we talked about, sometimes their families are tied into those even though they're not paid for through the case advocacy dollars.
Okay. I want to be mindful. I hate that we haven't been able to get to more of the questions, but again, everyone, please know your questions are important to us. We will get you responses to all of those. I think we've also had some of our staff here with Harmony that have shared a few questions as we've been doing the webinar via email with me. So we'll include those for you, Brenda and Pam, as well, so you can respond to them. In the meantime, thank you so much, Brenda and Pam. This has been such an important and informative webinar on post-permanency services. Gosh, just so much information. And speaking of that, as we mentioned, I think Brenda did earlier, if you would like the PowerPoint presentation that you've seen today, please email me. That email address is Nicole, Nicole, at Harmony, HARMONY, FamilyCenter.org. I will be more than happy. Just basically you can put in your subject line, I'd like the PowerPoint from today's presentation, and I will zip that to you. Also, you'll see on the screen, if you'd like more information about the services that FDR as well as SWAN are providing in Pennsylvania, you'll see Brenda and Pam's contact information on the screen. Again, if you request the PowerPoint information, that will be the last slides you see in that presentation. Brenda and Pam, any final thought for you? I want to be mindful of folks' time. I think we're just a minute or two after 3 p.m. Eastern Time.
I just want to thank everybody, and I know Pam does as well, for this time to talk. We look forward to meeting some of you when we come to Tennessee. If you feel like any of the things we talked about are things that Family Design Resources could be helpful to, we can be consultants. We can help to design, develop, or implement those kind of services in your area as well. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, listen, I hope everybody has a great day. Just a reminder, if you have not yet registered for the ASAP conference, please do so right away. If you need more information about that, if you've not accessed our registration website yet, please send me an email. Again, it's Nicole at HarmonyFamilyCenter.org, and I will be more than happy to send you that information. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day, and be sure to join us next week, Wednesday afternoon, for our third webinar in the series of 5 total pre-conference webinars. Take care.